Thank you, Angel. What a great pleasure to be here today. My name again is Matt Weber, and I'm one of the trainers in the Grow with Google program. Normally, I'm traveling the country helping small and medium-sized businesses improve their digital strategy with some of the tools that I'm going to share with you today. But in this environment, we get to spend time together virtually. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day to do this. Today, we're going to talk about how to reach your customers and your prospects online with Google. And specifically, we're going to divide today's presentation into three parts. Number one, we're going to take a 30,000-foot view of search and how Google works. Because the more you understand how the Google algorithm and how Google tries to match prospects and websites, the better that you can use it to improve your business digital strategy. Then the second part of the program, we're going to talk about how do you improve your digital visibility on Google. And we're going to give you some really specific tips and hints so that you appear more often in front of the people that you're trying to get attention of. And then third, we're going to talk about what role does Google Ads play in all of this strategy as well. So we'll give you the 30,000-foot view. We'll get into some very specific tips and details, and then we'll talk about what role ads play. But before I do all of that, I've got a very important question for you. And that question is, have you ever had a moment like this?
All the time, how do I get into working?
I want to share with you a moment that I had just a couple weeks ago when I decided to change the radio in my 1995 Jeep Wrangler, my prized possession. Now, I was pretty convinced I could do it in about an hour and a half. Now, my wife had absolutely no belief that I could do this whatsoever. And, but to her credit, she's had 20 plus years of witnessing my engineering and electrical skills. But I got to tell you, I did show her after about 7.5 hours, I got that radio changed. But I couldn't tell her that the lights wouldn't work and the car wouldn't start. So I'm having a moment. I am Googling. I've got my iPad out and I am Googling wiring for 95 Jeep Wrangler. I'm wiring how do you replace a radio in Jeep Wrangler. And as I'm searching for that, I come upon an ad. And that ad said mobile audio repair, a business that I didn't even know existed. And so I used them to finish that job that I couldn't start. The point of that story is that moments like that, and that you saw in the video, happen all of the time. In fact, there are billions of local searches each month. But the key takeaway today is that 4 out of 5 consumers use search engines to find info like store addresses, hours, and directions. The takeaway is that consumers go to search in the time of need. Some of you may remember a time when we used the phrase surf the web. Nobody surfs the web anymore. People are fairly purposeful when they go to the web. So for us as businesses, the key then is to align our content and to align our digital strategy with the problems that people are having, as that mobile audio repair business did to come in front of me during my panic search to figure out how to replace radio for a 95 Jeep Wrangler. So let's figure out, how do moments like that put together businesses and consumers? Well, it starts at a relatively high level with something called a web crawler. And lots of companies have web crawlers, pieces of software that crawl the web. And they used to be called spiders, and some people still call them spiders. And the reason people refer to them as spiders is because this software travels website to website in the same way that a spider used to travel to different parts of its web. Lots of companies have these. Google's has a name. It's called the Google bot. If you looked at your server logs for your website, you would actually see that the Google bot visited your website at this day and this time, and it left at this day and at this time. So the Google bot comes to your website, and as it comes to the website, it's kind of gathering a lot of information. And as it's gathering that information, it's throwing it back to Google servers. And once that information is put back into Google servers, then Google has the challenge of putting all of that information, imagine this, from all of the world's websites in a particular order. So think for a minute of a deck of cards and think about how many ways there are to arrange a deck of cards. You could put all the twos together, all the threes together. You could put all of the cards of one suit together. You could put all the sequences together, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, without any regard to suit. I think someone once calculated that there are over 5,000 different permutations in which you can create an order for just a deck of cards. Now imagine that for all the world's websites. But the reason those different indexes or orders are created is because Google's trying to create a match between the searcher and your websites and other websites. Now we can make search engine optimization as complex as we want. And in fact, it really is very, very complicated. There are 5-day conferences on search engine optimization. But as business owners, if we want to simplify it quickly for our own benefit, we just have to think of search like a dating website. If you think of a dating website, it's got a relatively simple purpose. It has to understand the preferences, the characteristics, the attributes of someone searching. And then it also has to understand the preferences, the attributes of the people in the database in order to create a match. And if the dating website doesn't understand either one of those two things very well, then it gets a failed relationships. That's how I explain a lot of celebrity weddings. But if you think about Google search, it's kind of the same thing. Google has, on one hand, the burden of understanding what is really the searcher's intent, which by now they've gotten really good at because they look at time of day, device, past search history, potentially previous websites, time of day, and they put all that together to really understand what's the semantic meaning behind the words that they type into that search bar. And then on the other side of that equation is your website. And does Google really understand what your website is about? And if it can't, then it can't make that match. So today we're going to talk about some tips to help Google understand what your website is about. Now, this whole trillion-dollar ecosystem starts with a relatively simple act. It starts when someone types into Google what we call a query. And these have evolved over time as people have gotten more specific. But if we stop right here, you can see how fundamentally marketing has changed. Because there was a time when we were all taught as business owners and marketers that we had to understand our prospects' demographics. Oh, I'm trying to reach women 25 to 54. And then there was a time we were all taught that we had to understand our prospects' psychographics. Oh, I'm trying to reach women who have a vision of the world that they feel they can change, and who are trying to inspire others. Today, what we really have to understand is how our prospects talk. We have to understand their vocabulary. We have to understand what words they use to try to find what you offer. And as I travel the country and helping small and medium-sized businesses, I often find there's a significant disconnect between the words that a business owner or a marketer will use to describe what they do and what searchers use to try to find that same service. Let me share with you a story. I have a client that is a very successful pest control company, and their value proposition is pest prevention. So they don't go into your home and spray a lot of chemicals. Instead, they focus on how do the pests get in your home, and they try to seal off those entryways to minimize the use of chemicals. And they call that pest prevention. And that's been the fulcrum of their brand for years. And they came to me and they said, Matt, we've got a problem. We don't really have a digital online presence because when we go to Google and we search pest control in a city that we're in, we don't come up. And I said, that's because the words pest control are nowhere on your website. Pest prevention is not equal to pest control, even though in their mind, that's what pest prevention was. It was a version or a form of pest control. Now, conversely, I could show them that they ranked #1 for pest prevention and a lot of variants of pest prevention, but the sad part of the story is consumers don't use that term, and nobody goes to Google and searches pest prevention. So their vocabulary, their vernacular was actually hindering them from getting in front of consumers. The key is to market yourself using the words that consumers use and not potentially the words that you use to describe your business. Now, once a consumer hits enter on that query, it generates what's called a search engine results page. And you'll often hear people refer to these as a SERP, S-E-R-P, search engine results page. And that search engine results page has some elements on it that you need to be familiar with as a marketer and a business owner to be able to maximize them for your own value. The first is URLs. And if you think about it, a couple of years ago, some websites used to have kind of ugly URLs, right? They would be website.com == database element 345 Today, it's much better if your URLs are English words and help communicate what that page is about to the consumer. In fact, here's a really important takeaway of this particular section. Today, it's not about ranking websites on Google. Today, it's about ranking web pages on Google. And that's because consumers have gotten so very specific in what they search for. 6 years ago, if you lived in Delray Beach and you wanted to buy a used car, you might have gone to Google and searched used cars, Delray Beach. Now people go to Google and they search 2012 Mazda GLC yellow 4-door with USB port in Delray Beach. They're very specific. So the more specific they search, that means the more our content has to align with that level of detail. And so it's then these interior pages on our website that are surfacing in these search engine results because the content is more likely to match with the query. So first step is to make sure that all of your URLs are friendly, they're English words, and they help convey the meaning of the page even in the URL. And of course, the URL is the website or the page address. And then you see these page titles, and these page titles are emanating from your website, and perhaps you put them there or your web development company put them there, or if you do employ somebody for search engine optimization, maybe they put them there. They're a little bit of a ranking signal for Google because if you think about Google's perspective, they're thinking you're not going to put a sign over your business that doesn't reflect what the business is. You would never put a sign that says jeweler out in front of a barber shop. So they look at these titles on each page, and you can see them in the browser when you roll your cursor over the tab in the browser. They look at these titles and they think, oh, it's kind of a cue as to what the page is about. So they're a little bit of a ranking signal, but more importantly, to the consumer looking at a search engine results page like you are now on the screen, they're a cue as to whether or not they should click on it. Because it's one thing to get on the search engine results page, it's entirely another to get the click. And another way to get the click is to focus on these descriptions which show up, and some people call these snippets. And these descriptions, again, are emanating from your website. Maybe you put them there, maybe your web developer put them there, or in some cases, when that Google bot crawled your website, if it found a couple sentences that it thought aligned with what it concluded the website page was about, it actually threw that back into the index. And so you might actually see a description that isn't of your own doing, but actually one that Google created because they thought it was more indicative of the page's content. But look on your screen. Look at the role that description plays. That description is an advertisement. It's encouraging that person to make the click. So those descriptions should sound something like, find out how to, discover, see, tell me what the benefit is for me, the person doing that search, and to why I should click on your website and not the many others that are on that search engine results page. And you're also going to see ads on a typical search engine results page, and on almost all of them, you'll see text ads, probably fairly familiar with those by now. Typically there's 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, and some really heavily trafficked search queries, there's maybe 4 on the top, and in a very rare case, 5 on the top. And then those shopping ads that you see on the screen are limited to websites that are e-commerce applications, and they have to have 2 things. They have to have a Google Merchant Center account, and they have to have what's called a product data feed. Because what you're seeing happening in real time on a search engine results page is Google actually going into that vendor, that advertiser's database, pulling the photograph of the item, pulling the description of the item, and pulling the pricing of the item in real time. This is all happening while this Google search engine results page is loading, and those are called shopping campaign ads. Now, at the very bottom of the page, there is a treasure chest for business owners and marketers, and it's often overlooked. This actually has a name. It's called Google Suggest. And here you can see what other phrases people use that are semantically related to the query that they put into the search engine box. So if you were thinking just a few minutes ago when we talked about the disconnect between how business owners describe their product or service and consumers, here's a really great way to start looking inside the language that people use. Now, some of you may remember a time when if you looked at this list, they all started with the same words that the query started with. And now when you look at the same list, sometimes they're completely different sentences and completely different words, giving you an indication that as many people that use Google, we don't all speak the same way and we don't all use the same words. So this really gives you an insight as to how people use their vocabulary to find what you're looking for. So a good exercise for you to do shortly after the program is to simply open a web browser, visit google.com, and search your business name. Search the words and phrases that you think your business should display for. And ask yourself, did you show up? And if you did, fantastic. And what text appears in that search engine results page? Was it compelling? Do you think it motivates someone to click? And if it didn't show up, what businesses did? And do you recognize them? And I always tell people, if you look at those businesses and you don't recognize them, then somebody's doing something wrong, meaning either you've got the wrong query or maybe those businesses have a complete misalignment of their own search engine optimization strategy. So how do we get on that page more often? How do we get in front of the people that are already looking for us? And this is such an important topic for small and medium-sized business owners, because I counsel everybody that I work with, all of my clients, to say the top priority is to market to the people who are already demonstrating a want or a desire for what you do. Think about it for just a minute. No matter what you do listening to this call, no matter what your business is, somebody this morning woke up and said, I need that, I want that, and they went to Google to find it. So should we spend our time and energy trying to get in front of those folks? Or should we spend our time and energy trying to shout to people who are not interested yet and to convince them to become interested? Yeah, let's get the low-hanging fruit. Let's make sure that when we go to bed at night, we're doing everything we can to get in front of the people who are already expressing a desire for what we do. And when we're done with that and we feel like we've got that system running pretty well, then we can move on and expand into other areas. But everybody's marketing plan should kind of begin with that at the base and build from it. So to get onto those Google search engine pages, one way is to make sure that you've claimed your Google My Business profile. And specifically here, I'm talking about a channel called Local Search. This Google My Business profile is going to show up when somebody searches usually a phrase centered around your brand name. Your Google My Business profile might show up, or in some cases, if someone searches what we call a local query, they put some kind of geographic indicator in their query, AC repair, Delray Beach, or plumber, Delray Beach. You might see a business who really matches that query show up with a profile, but you're not guaranteed to show up more when you have a profile, but it really does help. So you can start at google.com/business. And I suspect we've got 3 types of businesses on the program today. I think we've got people who can very confidently say they've claimed their Google My Business profile, they're using it, they've downloaded the app, and they're merchandising all of the functionality within it. So congratulations if that's you. Now, the second group of people, when you go to google.com/business, you're going to find that there's a profile there, but you don't own it and you can't change it. And so there's some steps that you can get walked through in a separate program to get a hold of it. And you might be asking yourself, How could you ever have a profile if you didn't create one for your business? Well, Google does what Google does best, and that's crawl the internet and look for information about your business. And it may be accessing Chamber of Commerce websites like this one that we have as our host today, or Dun & Bradstreet websites or other publicly available information. And it may be compiling information about your business and created a profile for you, even though you don't control it. But of course, you definitely want to, at the end of the day, control that. And so there's places on the internet. If you Google the phrase, how do I access a Google My Business profile that's not claimed, you'll get some good step-by-steps to claim that. And then some of you listening to the program today will go to google.com/business, put in your business name, and not find anything, which means that Google has no record whatsoever of your business. And that's a rarity. But then there's some steps for creating that Google My Business profile from scratch. So first way to get more visibility on Google search engine results pages is to make sure you have your Google My Business profile. Now let's talk about what many of you perhaps came to the program today to learn, which is about search engine optimization, its own very complicated topic. And again, we could talk literally for days about search engine optimization. And search engine optimization is both the art and the science of appearing more often on a Google search engine results page. Let me highlight just 6 things that you can do to appear more often on a Google search engine results page. And the first is to have really good, relevant, original content. In fact, I would ask you to even insert another word in your notes if you're taking notes, and I hope that you are, and that would be the word helpful. Remember what I said earlier in the program, people go to the web to solve a problem, and that's a key takeaway for businesses. So your content, therefore, has to be designed to help people with the particular problem that they go to Google to solve within your industry. Now, if you think about it for just a second, and maybe your own website falls into this category, but think about a lot of the websites you visit. Doesn't the first paragraph sound something like this? We were formed in 2012 under the principles of honesty, integrity, and we have high values, and our leadership team has over 50 years of combined experience. Sound familiar? Does any of that help someone solve a problem? No. You get a lot of chest thumping copy on websites because we're used to selling. We're not so used to listening. So we have to listen a little bit better to the problems that people are trying to solve on search. And we're going to talk about some tools in just a second that'll help you understand those problems. And then the content of the website has to be purposely aimed to help them. So it's less about selling. It's more like being the Red Cross. What's the Red Cross's mission? To help people. And when you take that strategy with your content and people then spend more time with it, they're more likely to share it, you tend to do better on Google search engine results page. Now, the second big thing that will help people is good logical organization, because think of the role of that Google bot that we talked about at the beginning of the program. It's going to visit your website and it's going to try to figure out, what's your website about? What do you really do? And it's going to face the same challenge that you might have challenged if you ever had whose idea of filing was just to throw stuff on the corner of a desk. And then maybe you had another colleague that you worked with at some time who could kind of wear out a label maker in a week because they had the green Penaflex folders and they were subdivided with the vanilla folders and they were subdivided. And you had to kind of understand what those two people did in their jobs to help them out. And you probably got really frustrated by the person who just threw things on the desk, right? You couldn't understand what they do, but where that really well-organized person had everything in a place, it was easier to understand what they do. And that's the challenge that the Google bot faces. It comes to some websites and they're just not organized very well. So what does an unorganized website look like? You may have gone to a website where they have a page called services. And on that page, it says, we do A, we do B, we do C, we do D, we do E, we do F, and we do G. And the Google bot kind of gets to that page and it says, I don't really know what this page is about. It's about a potpourri of things. But then maybe a competitor has one page devoted to A, and it talks about why they do A and what A brings, what benefit A brings the consumer, and maybe some subspecialties of A. And they've got a separate page on B that talks about in detail and helpful terms how they do B. And they've got a separate page on C that talks about it, and maybe C has some child pages underneath it that talk about the very specific elements of see. So that's a well-organized website. That's called taxonomy in the web development world, how data is structured. Think about your family chart for just a second. You can see in your family chart that you get some of your meaning as a person that flows down from your parents above you. And then you contribute to the people on the next level of that family chart. So websites are kind of built that same way. You've got a home page, and then they have a few pages underneath that. So some of the meaning of the homepage floats down to that next level. And then some of those pages have children pages underneath them. So some of that flows down. So when all of that is thought out and planned in a manner that helps each page have a very specific meaning, it helps the Google bot figure out what each page is about. And websites that are built in that disciplined taxonomy with an appropriate data structure tend to rank better on Google than websites that have pages that are about a whole host of topics on a single page. Now, we showed where those titles and descriptions showed up on the Google search engine results page, and each one of those should be optimized for a particular benefit. And so what are some common mistakes that you see? You might go to many websites and you might see that they have the same page title on every single page. So they're abandoning an opportunity to help pages about, and more importantly, they're abandoning an opportunity to have the searcher see something that might entice them to click. So a good exercise is to go back to your website, roll over that tab that's in the browser, and you can see the full page title and see if it's the same page title on every page. Another mistake, over-optimizing for your company name. If your company name is on every single page title, then you're over-optimizing for your company name, which is probably something that it doesn't struggle to rank for, and yet abandoning an opportunity to give some important information to rank for other phrases. And remember those descriptions. Yeah, they're not the ranking signal that they used to be, but they're definitely a signal to consumers. Because once you get on that search engine results page, now you've got a whole nother battle, and that is to get the click. And remember that the amount of clicks aren't evenly spread out. More clicks go to the things at the top of the page than at the bottom. So definitely we want to get higher, but why does someone click on position 2 or position 3 or position 4? Usually because that listing great description, something very enticing that communicated benefit to the searcher. We tend to put images that are way too big on our websites, and it's easy to understand why this happens. A lot of business owners will send images from their phone to their web developer or to the person in charge of the website. And you know when you send an image from your phone and it pops up that little warning and says, would you like to send it at the medium quality or the low quality or the high quality? And people will say, oh my gosh, it's for my website. I got to send it for the high quality. Well, then we're sending images with too large of a file size. And the web doesn't need high resolution. It's very different than print. We can see great detail in low resolution photos on the web. It's a very different medium. In fact, to give you some numbers that may be helpful, Google recommends that an entire web page should be no more than 1 megabyte in size. Now, if you go to your website, you can right click on any photo and then click on attributes, and you can see the file size of any photo. And it wouldn't surprise me if you find some photos by themselves that are over 1 megabyte. So if the whole page, the background, the typography, all of the photographs, any of the coding that's going into it should be 1 megabyte as a rule, as kind of a goal, and you've got 1 or 2 photos themselves that are over 1 megabyte, those photos haven't been optimized for the web. Getting on Google also has to do with speed now. And as you can imagine, Google is usually not very transparent in talking about how to rank higher on the Google pages, right? I mean, they can't tell you every bit of the algorithm. In fact, no one person knows every part of the algorithm. In fact, to kind of let you behind the black curtain, the algorithm is actually a series of connected algorithms, and the way that they protect it is that nobody knows the totality of all the algorithms, and many teams work on subspecialties of individual algorithms that make up the larger algorithm. In fact, it's said that if you could print out the entire algorithm that Google uses on 8.5 by 11 paper, it would go well beyond your ankle. But one time they were very clear. In very few instances are they this clear, and they've said that mobile load speed is a ranking signal. In fact, they've almost used those words. And we should all pay attention to those words, because if you're looking for one of the most direct routes to increase your ranking, it's probably going to be unlocked in improving the speed of your website, and in particular, the mobile speed. And here are some statistics that may be helpful. The average website, business website in the United States loads in about 7 or 8 seconds. Imagine that for just a minute. Imagine waiting 7 or 8 seconds for a website, and you probably wouldn't, nor would I. Now, Google recommends that the websites actually load in less than 2, and they recommend 1. So you can see how far the average business website is from the optimal loading time. And when you look at a Google search engine results page, understand that all of those pages are trying to load in the background and all of those links so that you as a user can have a good experience. And when you click on the Google search engine results page, you're getting closer to that website. And by the way, you can't judge how fast your website loads by your own personal experience, because your device, your computer, your phone, even your home network will do what's called caching, C-A-C-H-I-N-G, caching. It's going to remember key parts of different websites that you visit so that your browser doesn't have to load them over and over again. And in just a few minutes, we're going to show you a tool that you can actually see what your mobile speed is, but you can't judge it by your own personal experience. Now, lastly, a key to ranking well in Google is to optimize for mobile. I would suspect that if we looked at the Google Analytics for the folks on the call, that we'd probably see that most of you get 50 to 60% of your traffic on a mobile device. So think about that for just a second. How quickly can you visualize what your website looks on a mobile device? I bet you can visualize pretty quickly what it looks like on a desktop. But how much attention have you been paying to what it looks like on a mobile device? So it's important to recognize that some 40 to 50% of the people that you want to market to may never see your desktop version. Now, here's a challenge with building a good mobile website. Most desktop websites, when they make a mobile version, simply take the big thing and make it small, which doesn't work. It's kind of like saying that everything you could cook well in an oven, you could cook equally well in a microwave. And that doesn't work, does it? So you really have to design a custom mobile experience for today's searchers. And what does that mean? That means that the buttons are proportionally bigger. Recognize that people are navigating with their thumbs and not with the dexterity of a mouse and a cursor, right? Menus have to be bigger. And it also might mean paring down some of the content. There are videos that people might watch on desktop that they might not watch on mobile. So you really have to rethink the mobile experience. And we also know for sure that a mobile searcher is different than a desktop searcher. Mobile searchers are very often physically moving. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, physically moving. Now, hopefully they're not driving, but think about the attention span of someone who is physically moving, visiting your website, versus someone who is seated at a desk or maybe has a laptop on their lap and is focusing on what your content is. It's just a completely different experience. So optimizing for mobile is a significant way to improve your rankings on Google. Now, here's some great tools to apply what we just learned in the previous slide. And one of the big ones is g.co/testmysite, because this is where you're going to get an unbiased, unvarnished look at your site's mobile load speed. And it's going to turn into the basic red, green, yellow signals, right? Green if you're doing fantastic, yellow if you're close, but you could use some work, and red if you really should make this kind of a top level priority. Super easy tool to use, and you'll find it at g.co/testmysite. Google Search Console may be one of the most underrated and least used free digital tools available to any business. And Google Search Console is kind of like having your own X-ray machine for your website. Now, it does a lot of things, but I'm just going to focus on two things that I wanted you to take away as visiting this program. One is what Google Search Console will allow you to do is it'll see which pages on your website that Google crawled. Remember the Google bot, right? There's lots of reasons sometimes that the Google bot can't get to every page. And when I work with a lot of my clients, I find that's kind of the easiest thing to cure, is that you think your website's got 32 pages and Google's only found 16. And there's really a variety of technical factors that can cause the Google bot to not be able to access a particular page. So why isn't a particular page ranking very well? Google doesn't know it's there, doesn't know it exists. There may be technical impediments to the bot getting to that page. So you'll see that in Google Search Console. You'll see all the pages that it knows about. Now, the second thing that Google Search Console does, which is incredibly valuable, it will tell you all of the search phrases where your website appeared on a Google search engine results page, even if you didn't get the click. Now that's key, right? Because Google Analytics will tell you about all the visits where you got a click, but Google Search Console tells you about the search phrases that were used when you didn't get a click. So what if you went into Google Search Console and you saw that hundreds of people used this particular phrase and your website showed up, but it was on page 7 and you got 0 clicks, and you looked at that phrase and you said, yes, that is language that people use to get to my service. And there are hundreds of people using that exact combination of words every single month, and you get none of it. What would you do? Yeah, you would absolutely start looking at your website in a different way, right? And taking advantage of some of the tips that we talked about today to start orienting your website toward that phrase. So I like to tell people that this is one of the best pieces of marketing data that you can get. You can see consumer demand literally inside Google Search Console. And you can not only see the demand, but you can see how they're expressing themselves. And you can create a direct path to more business simply by paying attention to what's in your Google Search Console account. Now, Google Search Console is free. Depending on your technical skill level, it might take you anywhere from 15 minutes to 45 minutes to get Google Search Console connected on your website and verifying it. There's a number of ways to do it. And of course, a good reputable web development company might charge you for a half hour or an hour to do that. But I would make sure that that's on your super high A priority list, is to make sure you get Google Search Console hooked up for your website. And one more tool that you're probably familiar with, many of you probably have it, and maybe you don't use it often enough, and that is Google Analytics, which can answer nearly every question about your digital strategy and give you some fairly precise guides to what to do next. But it is just a huge amount of information for the average person to go through. So I want to highlight just 2 things that you can get out of here that can be very, very helpful. Number one is what I like to call exit pages. And I go through this exercise with all of my clients. An exit page is the page that people leave your website. So they travel to the website, they go to this particular page, and they depart from that page. Well, if it's a really good selling page and it sells through what you do, that's not a good page to be an exit page, right? That's an indication that you're not talking their language. Maybe there's too much chest thumping copy on there. You don't answer their question. You don't help them with their problem. And they're simply stepping off and doing another, perhaps, Google search from that page. And exit pages are, I want to pretend for a minute that we're all in the restaurant business. I don't know if there's anybody on the call today that's in the restaurant business, but for a minute, let's all imagine that we were in the restaurant business. And every single time we served a particular dish at our restaurant, every time we put it on the table, people got up from the table and just walked out the door. Imagine that happening. Now that's pretty crazy, right? I mean, as soon as we saw that happening, we'd stop serving that dish. Yet if you think about your website for a minute, you're still serving the dish. You're still serving the page that people come to and go, ugh, and leave on that. So one of the fastest ways to get more value out of our website is to cure these exit pages. Now, some exit pages are designed to be exit pages. If I fill out a form and I get a thank you page, yeah, I'm probably going to leave your website from that thank you page. But if it's a page that's really selling through why I should do business with you and it's an exit page, then we've got a problem. Now, the other thing that you can get out of Google Analytics, and of course there's a lot in there, is just a way to prioritize your time. And I work with a lot of owner-operators and I work with a lot of small businesses. And one of the challenges they face is that, oh, there's so much to do in this digital realm. And there is. And it's really about prioritizing. And so we can look in Google Analytics and we can see, where are you doing the best? What channel is bringing the most value for your business? Is that paid advertising? Is it your organic? Is it your social media? Is it a referral that you're getting from a particular website? The key to figuring that out is because then we want to really focus our time on expanding that rather than sailing against the wind in some of these channels that aren't producing for us. And I'll give you a great example. I have a lot of clients that I work with that devote a lot of time into their social media. And by the way, I'm not denigrating social media here at all. But when we try to connect the dots and we try to put leads and sales into the equation, a lot of them discover through Google Analytics that that channel is not producing the leads and sales, but it's using a lot of labor. And social media tends to be pretty labor consumptive if you do it right. So it's a great way to prioritize where you're going to spend your time by looking at that. And again, we could have a whole day's program on Google Analytics, but I just want to highlight that as a takeaway. Now, one more really great tool, because I would suspect that a lot of you are thinking, going, okay, this makes a lot of sense. It seems like the first thing I have to do is I have to figure out what words do people use, because that's going to become kind of my North Star to my digital strategy, is if I understand the language of my prospects. And one of the places that'll help you do that is called Google Trends. And you can find it at g.co/trends. You can also find it at google.com/trends. And what you can do on Google Trends is you can see below the blue line there that you can put in various phrases that you're thinking about that you think people might use. And then you can get a relative measurement back of the relative volume, not the absolute, the comparative relative volume of those search phrases. Because for most businesses, there's a lot of phrases that people use. People are sometimes unique in their vocabulary, but you're ultimately going to see a bell curve, right? You're going to, that bell curve in your mind, yes, there are people on the fringe on either end that use a particular combination of words, but you're going to be surprised to see how often the vernacular is common. And Google Trends will help you figure that out. So you don't have to try to write content for every single possible phrase that people may use. Instead, you really want to focus your content on where that bell curve is, where the highest volume, or as my grandfather used to say, fish where the fish are, right? Figure out what phrase the people are using and attack it, and then do it again for another phrase. But prioritize your content strategy based on that. If you look closely at the screen, you can see that Google Trends will allow you to change not only the time, you can see it there, it says past 12 months, you can look back 6 months, you can look back 90 days, but you can also look back at the geography, and on the screen you can see it says Colorado. You can choose Florida. And if there's enough volume, you can even choose Delray Beach if there's enough volume. So you can really focus in your results and really fine tune it to make sure that your strategy is pointed in the right direction. And so after the program, I definitely think it's worth your time to go to g.co trends, enter some words or phrases related to your business, and narrow it down by location, narrow it down by date range, and explore the queries that come back to you. All right, we're in our last 15 minutes of the program, and let's talk about what role online ads can play in your success. We're going to skip past this video in the interest of time, but when you use Google Ads, your ads can appear in one of two places. They can appear where we've looked at them throughout today's program on that search engine results page, but a lot of people don't know that there's a second part of Google Ads, and it's called the Google Display Network. And the Google Display Network is literally millions of websites across the world that have engaged Google to sell their ad inventory. And they range from maybe your neighbor has a gardening blog and he or she has chosen to use Google to sell some advertising inventory on their gardening blog, to the New York Times, to some of the largest media outlets in the world, some of the largest websites in the world to sell some of their inventory through Google Ads. And you can run an ad on either your neighbor's gardening blog if you choose, or the New York Times, by using the Google Display Network. Now there's two ways to use Google Ads, and one of them is to use what's called a smart campaign. And smart campaigns I recommend very, very strongly for people that may have a limited amount of time and want to take advantage of Google's vast knowledge of how people search. You can run Google Ads manually and have far more granular and finite control. But if you're looking for a fast and effective online ad vehicle, then you're going to use what's called a smart campaign, and you're going to start at ads.google.com. Now, the process that I'm about to describe to you is so easy. I've literally witnessed people over and over again doing it in 20 minutes or less. They have a full ad running in 20 minutes or less. So here are those basic steps, super simple. You're going to start by entering your business name. You're going to enter your website address. That's not going to challenge anybody. And then you're going to give Google what's your goal, whether you're trying to drive phone calls, if that's appropriate for your business, or if you're trying to drive people to come to your physical location, or if you're trying to get people to come to the website and fill a quote form or download a catalog. And immediately, right away, just by some of these selections, you can begin to see what the algorithm is going to do in the background. If your focus is on calls, then it's probably going to emphasize ads on a mobile device where people are one thumb click away from calling. If your goal is to get people to come to your physical location, the algorithm may potentially emphasize ads to people who are physically closest to your location. So some things are going to happen in the background just by the choices that you make. Now think about the amount of control you have over this advertising campaign and compare that to some of your previous advertising experiences. The first thing you can do is you can define a radius. If you only want ads to be seen within 5 miles, 10 miles, 13 miles of your business address, you can do that. But you can also, if that doesn't work, you can also pick a geographic area, cities, zip codes, counties, because some natural borders get in the way of that radius. I've got some clients in a particular part of Florida where people simply don't cross the river to get to a business. They would rather travel 7 miles in the opposite direction than travel 2 miles across the river to get to a business. And those things happen all across the country. Those natural barriers come into play. So instead, you can pick cities, zip codes, and counties. You're going to choose a category. You don't get to create your own category here, but you're going to find an awful lot of really specific categories. And then once you choose a category, Google's going to drop down in that section below on the screen. It's going to say, well, other people who have chosen this category advertise these kind of services or these kind of related phrases. And you can turn them off right there. And as you can see in this example from a yoga studio, not every yoga studio offers the same kinds of yoga. So it came back after they chose yoga studio. It said, here's all the different types that people advertise. And then this advertiser has the ability to say yes, yes, no, 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 yes, and really narrow that down. I think for some people, here's maybe the challenging part. It's to write a good ad because, it's still a little bit of a bar fight on that Google search engine results page. We've got to get that person's attention as opposed to the other people running ads and the other people that show up in the organic listings. We've got to get their attention. So we got to write a good ad. And so you got a 3 headline, 30 characters each to convince me why to come to the website. You've got 2 description lines that are 90 characters each. And what's called a display URL. A display URL is kind of like a vanity plate for your car. It may not be the actual page's website address because maybe that's not one of those, as we talked about, attractive URLs, but maybe you can put on a vanity URL. So it's yourwebsite.com, the specific topic that you want to tell people you have, even though that's not the URL for your page. So you get to put in that vanity URL to help people understand. Now, from a budgeting standpoint, you have a tremendous amount of control. You're going to set your own monthly budget. Now, Google's going to recommend one, but if you put in your own, you're going to see it's going to come back and it's going to calculate. It's going to say, fantastic. If you do that, here's how many clicks we anticipate, and here's how many conversions or leads we anticipate. It's going to use all the history it knows about the use of the phrases that you've chosen to build those predictions. Now, see what's important here is there's no long-term commitments. You can start it, you can stop it, although I wouldn't recommend that. Everything's got to take time to learn. The algorithm has to learn. But you're not committed to any specific period of time. And it's not going to go above that number that you put in. So you've determined where the ads run. You've determined how much money will you spend. You're in complete control to be able to turn on this finely tuned automated system to run your ads. You'll get reports as to what happens, which is one of the great things about digital advertising is the fact that we see it in real time and we can react to it in real time. So gone are the days where we bought a magazine ad and simply hoped for the best when it came out. We see what's happening and we can react to that data. We can even pick and choose different days, and Google will show us what phrases that it's displaying the ads for, and we can get even more granular and we can remove those. And when you connect your Google Ads account to your Google Analytics account, a whole bunch more really great data comes into play. Now, these smart campaigns are also available for those of you on the call that have an e-commerce website. They're called smart shopping campaigns. And again, it's kind of that drive-through fast food version of Google Ads. A lot less setup and using some power of the Google algorithm to support that. And you can find that at google.com/retail solutions/shopping campaigns. And when you use the shopping campaigns, these ads are eligible to show up throughout that display network, which means it can show up on YouTube, it can show up on other people's websites, it can show up on Google Maps, it can show up in Gmail. So it can show up on a lot of properties. So when we talk about Google search, we're typically talking about ads that run on that search engine results page. And when we're talking about ads that run on the display network, we're talking about ads that can run on a lot of properties. All right, take a deep breath. We covered a lot. That was a lot. So let's do a little recap. So what are the to-dos coming out of the program today? One is to really create a search-friendly, meaning something that the Google bot can get to and access, website with useful, and I'd add the word helpful information there that loads quickly and works really well on all devices. Maybe you came into today's session with a desktop view of the world, but I hope you're leaving today's session with a mobile view of the world and trying to understand how well your website is servicing that mobile visitor. Then the second takeaway is to explore resources like Google My Business, Google Test My Site, Google Search Console, Google Analytics, and Google Trends. And everything in that bullet is free. Absolutely everything. And I'm a big believer in taking advantage of as many free tools as that people will offer me. And then finally, think about online advertising, because while the things that you'll do in step 1 and step 2 are going to be incredibly helpful, they do take time. Those things don't change overnight. And yet, as I mentioned, you can have an ad running on the phrase that you've determined that you think could be valuable in 20 minutes or less by using Google Ads. And I also counsel small and medium-sized businesses to think of online advertising as not only advertising, but think about it as research. Think about it if you've determined, hey, people might use this phrase and we think it might be good for the business. Maybe before we invest the time to create that content and rank organically, maybe we should try it. Put an ad on that phrase and see what happens when people visit our website sourced to that phrase. Do they do the thing that we want them to do? Do they have the intent that we thought they would have? So online advertising is not only great for advertising, if you think about it, it's a really good focus group and research tool, and it will help guide your strategy because you can get in and you can get out without any of those long-term commitments. Now, more resources are available if you want to kind of further what we've talked about today. Here's everything that we've talked about in terms of the actual tools. I'm going to hold this up for just a second, and maybe you're going to pull out your camera, take a picture of this screen, or we'll find out in just a few minutes if, and I think Delray Beach is going to post a copy of this program on YouTube, so you can come back and visit this screen as well. So if you want to go a little bit deeper, you can go to the Grow with Google website, where you'll find tools for local businesses. You'll also find tools if you want to improve your developing skills. And if any of you happen to be teachers in the room, there's great classroom resources as well. So visit the Grow with Google website. And you can find that by Googling Grow with Google. I believe that puts us right about on time, and we actually have 6 minutes left over for some questions. I think Angel's going to come back into the program in just a second. But if I don't get the chance to say thank you, I want to make sure that I say thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure being with you. And let's take a look at the questions. There are no questions. So if you do have a question, you can put one into the question functionality on the screen. And we've got just about 5 minutes left, and we're happy to answer any questions. We'll see how fast you can type. Angel, did anybody happen to send you a question privately?
No, we don't have any questions yet. We usually give everybody a couple of minutes because sometimes they have to gather their thoughts or they're typing. Let's see. We have great information from Stephanie, but that's not a question. Thank you, Stephanie. Glad that we could have you join in and watch us today. Let's see. Leslie DeCruz just asked a question. Does placing an ad increase your search placement? Oop, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, what a great question. And I get this a lot. And the answer, and I can say this answer to you, Leslie, with 100% confidence, having talked to and worked with people at the highest level of Google, The answer is unequivocally no. Now, every time I present this program, and particularly when I do it in person, someone will come up to me after the program and they'll whisper in my ear and they'll say, you know, I heard what you said, but I started using Google Ads and my website ranking improved after I started spending money. So that probably does happen, but there's a difference between correlation and causality. So let's say for a minute that you have a website that is kind of dead in the water and it's not getting any traffic, and all of a sudden you start running Google Ads for it. It starts getting visitors. What do those visitors do? They click around, hopefully they share it. And so when you start now having activity and potentially sharing it, and that creates backlinks, and that activity itself, people on a website engaging with it, that's a signal to the Google algorithm as well. So that can improve ranking, but it's not a result of paying for the ads. It's a result of the increased activity that the Google ads generated as a result of the ads. But there is no direct correlation between spending money on a Google ad and having your website rank organically. Great question. Another question from Victoria says, all things being equal on paid ads, how do different budgets affect things? Great question, especially if you're using a lot of the algorithmic capabilities of Google Ads. Some of those take time to learn. And so sometimes advertisers will make a mistake of kind of suffocating the algorithm by not giving it enough budget to be able to accumulate a statistically reliable sample. So this now becomes like any other scientific experiment. It needs a statistically significant sample upon which to make projections and forecasts. And so when I watch people go to Google Ads and maybe they'll spend like, $10 a day, and their clicks are costing, $6 or $7, one click a day is not going to accrue the volume that's needed to be able to make those algorithms work for you. And that may work if you're running your account completely manually, but even then you're not getting the data fast enough to be able to make judgments. So budgets do impact it from that level. Sometimes I think that people put in way too many keywords for their budget too, Leslie. So for example, I go into accounts and I'll see where a business has put in 50 keywords and they've put in a budget of like $10 a day. So that's kind of the equivalent if you had a BB gun and let's say that you had only 4 BBs, but out in front of you were 60 tin cans. You only have 4 BBs. So somebody has to make the decision as to which one of those cans to shoot at. In that case, when an account is created like that. So in that situation, you're turning that power over to Google. Google's going to pick which can to shoot at. And so you're not, as the account manager, which then I think, again, the account's not getting the proper direction in order for it to get back to the learning that it needs quick enough to make better decisions. I hope that answered your question.
All right, it's looking like we're right on time. If anybody else has any more questions, please feel free to type. But at this time, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Matt, for hosting. Thank you for your time. We would love to have you guys all join us next week again for our weekly webinar at 12:30. It will be hosted by FPL, and it will be resources and tips on how to conserve energy. I know their thought process right now is really helping everybody save as much money as they can. And then Matt, do you want us to include your information in case anybody needs to reach out to you afterwards, or is there all the resources are in the presentation?
No, you can include the email address that you and I used to set up this program.
Perfect. Wonderful. Well, that sounds great. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. And thank you, Matt, for being here today.
Thank you. Have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.